If you work in the food industry, the number one thing they consider is speed and cost. Dapat mabilis at mura lang. Unfortunately, panelist training makes for most of the expense, no? So these novel methods are designed to be faster and have less training, therefore lower cost. Usually, they can utilize both trained and untrained panelists for the task. Of course, syempre yung level ng data na makukuha mo dito medyo slightly iba din. But let's look at them. So first we have verbal-based methods like fast profiling and check all that apply, or kata. These are built upon the free choice profiling, which allows the assessors to use their own attributes when assessing. Also, you generate a direct description of the products without the attribute and scaling alignment. Thus, mas mabilis siya in that regard. Flash profiling is basically a combination of free choice profiling and ranking attributes or ranking methods. So in this case, the participants are given the samples and they rank the product's attributes instead of measuring actual intensity. So may pagka-relative, may pagka-ordinal yung dating niya, as you can see in this scale. So for example, if you think that sample A has a sweet flavor on the high end, you take sample B and roughly measure that as here, and parang nagiging every time you put a sample here, everything yung succeeding samples are referred to based on the positions of the previous ones. You have two sessions in this case with one intersession where samples are presented simultaneously, and usually yung intersession na ito ay pag-pool ng generated attributes list, not for consensus but to allow panelists to update their own list if desired. So parang may kopyahang session magaganap. Alright. And then these are analyzed using GPA as well. So the two things that you want to do here is to generate the proper amount of proper attributes that could allow discrimination, that could permit ranking. So dapat ay magkaroon ka ng enough attributes na alam mong doon nagkakaiba yung mga sample para doon mo siya ma-differentiate. So dito naman sa kata or check all that apply, may pre-selected attributes na pinapresent sa panelists. Ito ay na-obtain through focus group discussions or other open-ended questioning methods. And then the panelist, from the name itself implies, just checks all of those things that apply. So it's not so much a quantification of the intensity, but rather a profiling of which attributes are present. And to prevent bias, the products are presented one at a time. Take note that the attributes in this case are not related to sensory aspects, but also hedonic or emotional aspects. So, talagang medyo consumer-related yung dating niya. Kasi romantic. Okay, how can you say that a certain food, well, in this case, it's a lotion, pero does it apply to food products as well? Yung mga na-evoke na emotions ng isang food product. Ito namang similarity methods, similar sila dun sa difference testing wherein you group the products. Okay, so first you group them according to how similar you think they are as a panelist, no? And then next you try to verbalize the differences between them. So an example here, it's a free sorting and data coding task. Okay, for example, you have 6 products and then bahala ka na isort sila into as many groups as you think there should be based on their similarity. So there could be as many as 6 groups, lahat sila similar, or just one group kasi yung 6 na yon similar for you. Okay? Then i-encode mo dito sa table yung sagot ng panelist. If they're both similar, yung pair na yun ay similar, you put a 1. Kung hindi, 0. And of course, the diagonal is always 1 because a product should be similar with itself. Then after that, i-discuss kung ano yung bakit mo hinati siya into these three groups? Ganon. Ano yung mga qualitative aspects na nag-lead sa'yo to do that, and so on. So under the similarity-based methods is the free sorting task. Ganon din, like in the previous slide. You are displayed the products, of course, in random order. And then, bahala ka kung paano mo i-group yung products na yon. So, bahala ka rin sa criteria mo. And again, after the first step, you can provide terms to characterize each of the groups based on why you think they are mutually exclusive from the other groups. Of course, a pre-established list of characteristics could be provided, especially if you're going to give this to consumers who might not have a very wide vocabulary to explain yung nararamdaman nila sa senses nila. So here's an example of data coding. Dito naman, yung words na ginamit to describe each group by each assessor are tabulated, no? So kung anong, for floral, which assessors describe which product as floral, and so on. So ika-count mo siya like kung twice na sinabing fruity yung isang wine, sample 2, yan, by 2 assessors. So yun nga lang, ang mahirap dito is kapag hindi ka nag-provide ng predefined list mo, baka na may panelist na sobrang eccentric lang ng vocabulary nila, kaya sila lang yung nagsasabi ng ganun. So yun yung isang risk niya. Mapping, on the other hand, is a rapid method wherein samples are given and you are simply asked to place them on a two-dimensional plane depending on how close or far apart you think they are. So in this case, of course, the assessors are left to their own devices as to how to tell kung bakit magkaiba o bakit pareho yung dalawang product. Okay? And you are also required as a panelist to describe each product by writing a few words in the sheet. So here's an example. So yan, you're given the samples and then you place them on a sheet of paper on an XY coordinate plane, depending on how you think they should be placed. And minimeasure lang yung X and Y coordinates, no, para masabi kung gaano ka-similar yung mga samples sa bawat isa. So then there are also the reference-based methods. These are done to address the problem with the previous ones na dahil lahat ng samples ay presented at the same time, ay mahirap silang i-process. So based on that name nga niya, may reference. At least kung may reference ka, there's a point of comparison for one sample na hindi lang compared against each other siya directly. Okay, so there are two major reference-based methods, the polarized sensory positioning and the pivot. So in PSP, imbes na sensory attributes yung gamitin mo, meron kang prototype reference products, and this will act as your meta attributes kasi nga conglomeration sila ng kung ano-anong attributes. And when you receive these three references, which are presented one at a time, you evaluate the product based on the references on a continuous scale. And then afterwards, nire-reveal yung tunay na pagkakaiba ng mga produkto at dun sa reference. So for example, in this case, you have references A, B, and C, products A, B, and C. And if you compare, let's say, one product, so how similar is it from A to A to B and to C? Okay, and then i-code lang dito yung scores per assessor. So product 1 versus reference A, product 1 versus reference B, and reference C. Then of course, these are the magnitudes ng similarity or difference based on the line scale. So the descriptive method, ito medyo mas verbose siya, no? It has the advantages of allowing for a rich description of products, but the disadvantage would be that the data interpretation would be a nightmare because it requires the analysis of text rather than statistical analysis. So parang kung literature major ka, baka mas may edge ka over regular number-oriented scientist. So first you're given the 3 reference products presented one at a time, and you evaluate both the product and the reference. Okay, and for each product reference pair that you evaluate, you write down attributes na kung saan nag-iiba yung product and yung reference. However, you can only use words and not sentences, and also only positively worded. So, walang negation na magaganap. So, hindi ka pwede magsabi na, halimbawa, sabihin mo siyang maanghang, okay, matamis, etc. Mabaho, mabango, ganon. Okay, although syempre mas yung attributes mo mas specific, okay? And then the choosing of reference is within the range of the products to be evaluated. So kung ikaw ay nag-evaluate ng chocolates, iba man yung reference dun sa actual product, it must be within line comparable dun sa lasa ng products mo, ng line ng chocolates, no? Hindi ka maglalagay ng something off like kung milk chocolate yan, hindi ka maglalagay ng reference na white chocolate or dark chocolate or yung may sili na tsokolate, di ba? So here's the example ng score sheet for pivot profile. Okay, so based on the reference, the product is of a lighter orange shade. It's less bright, it's more red. It's compared to the reference less fruity, spicy, and alcoholic. And is more floral and more honey notes yung kanyang smell and so on. And then in this example, they combine the data from 2 assessors and try to tabulate yung information. So even though each method is different from the other, generally yung categorization ng novel versus traditional methods ay merong something in common lahat ng traditional methods as well as yung novel methods, ganun din. So in terms of how they treat consumers, traditional methods typically limit consumers to hedonic ratings and exclude them at all from descriptive sensory evaluation per se. However, yung point of view dito sa novel methods is that consumers can perform similar to trained panelists. Yun nga lang yung difference is that the consumers have varied and spontaneous terms, whereas trained panelists can have fewer but precise terms. In terms of its biggest advantage, traditional methods can identify smaller differences between samples, especially when very complex na yung food matrix mo, yung food product mo, like you're gonna deal with breaking down the texture characteristics, you're gonna break down the many aroma or taste notes in, let's say, wines and cheeses and the like and other complicated foods. Now, on the other hand, the swift profiling methods using semi-trained panelists for novel methods may give you more details, so breadth rather than depth, kasi unlimited yung pwede mong sabihin, hindi ka nare-restrain nung ito lang yung lexicon natin, ito lang yung vocabulary natin. Kasi sa traditional, kung wala sa vocabulary, hindi mo siya i-consider. Sa novel method naman, kaya mong i-describe yun kahit na sa 10 tao, mag-isa kang nakasabi na may ginamit kang word to describe a certain aroma or texture, lalabas yun sa data. Sa traditional, baka hindi. Kasi nga, traditional usually may consensus. So may matatanggal na information. On the other hand, in novel methods, magkakaproblema tayo sa interpretation na malalost in translation ka. Minsan kasi yung consumer sensory terms na ginagamit, sa sarili lang nila yan kung paano nila naiintindihan yung isang salita, hindi sa kung ano yung ibig sabihin niya sa general public or sa totoong buhay. Okay? And dahil nga walang clear definition, pinasulat mo lang, sabi mo, words, not sentences. So, ikaw ngayon yung bahalang mag-deconstruct ano yung ibig sabihin niya sa word na yon. So, it doesn't mean that novel methods are automatically more advantageous to traditional methods. And usually, ang approach natin actually as sensory evaluation professionals, more on traditional pa rin. Okay? Since ito yung foundationary, itong novel, we could probably update our exercises to try and include some of them, hopefully. Okay, but generally, novel methods are used to save time and money, sometimes at the cost of sacrificing the depth of data available. Not always. Alright, so normally itong traditional methods, sila yung mas based on numbers and statistics. And therefore, they can give you statistical differences and yung mga least significant differences kaya lang identify. Yung novel methods, medyo descriptive lang yan. It's like comparing, in a sense, yung hard sciences to the more soft ones, I guess. Alright, so as a downside as well for novel methods, mas mahirap yung pag-analyze ng data. Kasi nga hindi siya straightforward. You have to look at the words, you have to do some interpretations or misinterpretations along the way. Okay. And tayo kasi mga scientists, mas gusto natin yung numbers, significant ba o hindi. Ano yung standard deviation, ano yung mean sa novel, medyo walang ganon. Okay? So, kasi sanay tayo, mag-Excel, input ka equation, gamit ka SPSS, i-run mo siya, tapos. Pero sa novel methods, minsan, kung wala pang software package available, ikaw pa ang bahalang gumamit ng iba-ibang software na meron or processes manually para ma-process mo yung data from start to finish.